and I'm very lucky to say I've been part of the Extreme Hangout, sort of extended family for several years. We started at COP talking about fashion. That was in COP 26 in Glasgow. We've been to Sharm el-Sheikh, we've been to Dubai, and here we are. I don't know how many of you in the room know about the problems in fashion that we have, in pollution, modern slavery, emissions, waste. Okay, so there's a few people who we know. Okay, so for those of you who don't, we're going to convert you. So give us 40 minutes and you're going to come out wanting to become a nudist, I think, probably. But we're also going to give you some solutions so you don't feel totally guilty about getting dressed or going shopping. I'm very fortunate to be here with Eva Cruz and Julieta Dexter. I've known Julieta for quite some time. She and I both go back to the world of high fashion, so we're kind of in confession for the rest of our lives, but doing what we can to use our sphere of influence to make the world a better place, I think. Julieta used to run the communication store, which then became Science Magic, which is one of the world's greatest branding and strategy and media and marcoms agencies. Is that fair? Yeah, it's one of the greats. Yeah, it was one of the greats when everything moves. And now you are CEO of SmartWorks, sitting on various other boards, and chair of SmartWorks, which is a wonderful charity that helps women get dressed in many ways. And Eva was formerly at the Global Fashion Agenda and now is at Pangaea, who we love because they've shown that material science can also have a consumer product and are driving incredible innovation. So is there anything I've missed there, you guys? No? Okay, thank you. So just to set the context, we were doing some emails about what we wanted to talk about today, and then I woke up this morning and had this kind of real light bulb, and then I did that kind of crazy, too much caffeine, got on the voice note to Eva and was like, Eva, I've had an idea, I've got a totally different idea, this is what I want to talk about. And because we'd set out saying what are all the problems in fashion and what are the solutions, and I suddenly thought, here's what I'd like to talk to you both about. My thesis this morning was, we are where we are. For those of you that don't know, fashion's on track to double its emissions rather than cut them in line with the Paris Accord. It sends one garbage truck of waste fashion to landfill every second globally. It only recycles 1% of its waste, whereas about 85% could be. I mean, I could go on and on about the devastation to people and planet, but we are where we are. So with that, we know that in the same way that turkeys don't generally vote for Christmas, we find that fashion is still woefully burying its head in the sand and doing its best to tackle some of these things while still maintaining a healthy bottom line and making profit. So I think it leaves us with this hypothesis, I think, of what can everybody do and what should everybody else do to we're not trying to try and cancel fashion because it generates huge amount of GDP, growth, jobs, and beauty and gives us the opportunity to not be nudists. But what can we do and what could everyone be doing? Consumers, investors, even insurance companies, policymakers, legislators, scientists, media. That's really, I think, the question here is what should everybody be doing to try and get this industry back on track? Does that sound... How do you...
Sure, we're here on stage, right?
Yeah. So Eva, I mean, you'll tell us about how Pangaea, both you in your work prior to Pangaea and now Pangaea, and what you guys are doing to solve that problem and how you solve it, and also lastly, what other brands could learn from what you do.
Okay, there's a lot to say there, but yeah. Before joining Pangaea is a 4-year-old business, so we're basically a startup, and we come from the material science side of things. I'll dive a little bit into that, but before that, I used to run an organization called Global Fashion Agenda. It has a landmark event called the Global Fashion Summit, and we did the first one 15 years ago. At that time, sustainability was not the word. We called it CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility, and it was very few companies who had a little bit of work done in that. Maybe they had one person very far away from the CEO's office, never in touch with the board, and investors did not know about them. And they were mainly there for housekeeping, to check on, maybe some chemical issues, maybe they had some child labor issues, but honestly, we didn't know anything about the impact of this industry. And I think Mary summed it up really well with just throwing some of those devastating stats at you. But basically, you can look at an industry and name an issue, fashion has it. It's really one of the world's largest industries, it's one of the world's most impactful because it has such a diverse supply chain and it's sourcing so many natural resources and it has so many hands because products and fibers and everything goes through so many human hands. So it is a very complicated and difficult system. But it's also based on the sense of creativity, ingenuity, and a lot of beauty and
artistry
fun,
and self-expression,
which is the great and also the cultural side of it. However, it also constantly fuels a need for new. How many of you often look at what you have in your closet and think, oh, why don't I have some, we all sort of run out of, steam for what we have. We desire new stuff. It fuels this constant need for more and for new and for a new look. And that, I think, is the root of what is really difficult to challenge in an industry that keeps growing. Because, yes, we're going to be more people on the planet, but we do buy a lot more product. There's so much more stuff in all of your closets that you're not wearing.
And the industry is producing 100
and
billion
it keeps producing it. So,
so Pangaia.
We used to run these events, the global fashion summits, and at them we found from feedback from a lot of participants that they were very inspired when they went from the summits, but when they all came back to the desk on Monday, every day hit them like a train, and they forgot everything they learned the last week, and they didn't know who to call and who could help them.
Yeah.
The biggest footprint of the fashion industry is in the materials.
70%, right?
70% of the environmental footprint, and of course also a lot of the social implications, sits in the fabrics, in the material sourcing, in the processing of them. So a lot of the solutions could be to just look at that. Can we make better products that are allowing you guys to buy products that are still desirable in beauty and exciting for you, but that is made in a different way? And that's where Pangaia came into the game, because we did, at the summit, we had this innovation forum where we were exhibiting material solutions so that the participants at the events could hear inspiring talks, but they could also go downstairs and meet someone and maybe pick up a business card and have someone to call on that Monday.
Yeah.
And Pangaia actually came into the world because of that, and looking at, could we scale some of those solutions? Because I think we're going to talk a little bit about that is one of the biggest issues, is that they still don't really come to scale. There's a lot of innovation. We know so much, but to really bring it into the industry and exchange those big, polluting fibers, the polyesters, which is about 60% of our products, is just plastics. It comes from oil. It's just shitty for you. It's shitty for the planet. Microfibers everywhere.
Yeah.
And then cotton, which might sound like a great natural fiber, but it isn't. It's highly land intensive, highly water intensive, highly pesticides intensive. So we need to look at the whole supply chain of materials, and that's where Pangaia sort of fits in. Yeah. So we started as a material science company, trying to put out new materials and fibers and solutions for an industry that was so much in need. But because the phone didn't just ring immediately and a ton of people wanted our seaweed fiber or flower down or whatever it may be, we decided to also become a brand to showcase the material science. Because I think one thing, and I'm not going to stop talking in a second and pass it on, but one of the things that will always have to be a driver when you talk about buying sustainable fashion products is that you need to desire the product. Yeah. You might want to buy a crooked carrot that's organic. You're not going to buy an ugly jacket, right? You'll buy a beautiful jacket that appeals to you and all of that. So even if the materials are made differently, the design still needs to be desirable. I think that's what Pangaia proved, that you are actually able to make a good business model, putting out products. We don't do fashion, like we don't do fashion shows, we don't do seasons per se. Of course, we have some selling more shorts or t-shirts when it's summer. But we like to say that we do products for a reason and not for a season. Yeah. And also helping our customers bridge between collections so they don't have to buy new all the time. Yeah. But I'll stop for a second.
No, that's really interesting. I want to come after this, later in the conversation, we're going to come on to the relationship between food, because I do think that sustainable fashion has come to a point where it's a bit like, I'm not going to eat lentils. I don't want to wear something that looks like the wearable equivalent of lentils, and that's the problem. Like, there's not enough brands out there that are actually making really desirable fashion-forward things, and we'll come on to that. But thinking about fashion-forward, Giulietta, so you've done more time in the industry than I have, I think, and you've seen it all. You've represented Versace, Max Mara, Chris K. I mean, you name it, you've worked with them. You've done fashion shows, campaigns, strategy, and now you're chair of Smart Work. So what made you want to transition away from that world of high fashion that we both used to inhabit?
First of all, I thought it was quite interesting when we were thinking about this talk that actually being nude in public is illegal So
In the global north, yeah.
we've got a way to go until we get there, where we can actually just stroll around without any clothes on like we used to do.
Or like they do in the Amazon or
Yes, exactly. So I think we've got a way to go. But I was thinking about that because the answer to your question, very briefly, is we have to buy and we have to make less. Yeah, that's the bottom line. And to Ava's point, we've all got masses in our closets that we don't wear and we certainly don't need. My journey started when I started my first business called The Communication Store, as you said. And really what I wanted to prove at the time was that business could and should be a force for good. I don't know how engaged you're all feeling politically in terms of the leadership of our political leaders. Obviously, NGOs are doing their very, very best. But I'm afraid that where there's money, there's power. And therefore, my thesis as a much younger person than I am today was this has to work. And people at that time really behaved quite badly in the fashion industry.
Oh, yeah, it was
so
rife.
to be really fair to everybody in this room, I wasn't only worried about the environmental side, I was worried about the social side, the human side.
And the culture side.
And the cultural
Culture of
side.
it, yeah.
Because this fantastical industry of culture, of philosophy, of art, of imagination, of beauty, that touches everyone, in some countries more than others, to me was just so remarkable and amazing. And then I found myself on the set of The Devil Wears Prada.
Did you?
No, not actually,
literally.
but like actually, like in
Living
my
it in
day
real
job.
life, yeah.
And I remember going to see the film with my husband and his sister, and they thought it was hilarious. And I was like, why are you laughing at this?
It's just another day at the office.
This is just like a desperate, and you know, we had things like Ab Fab that, you know, the brilliant.
Anyone here seen Absolutely Fabulous? Do you know about it? Yeah. If
Yeah.
you haven't, it's a brilliant spoof, but it's
It was just
in light of this, it's alarming.
It was the spoof of our life.
Yeah.
And everything was fabulous, darling, and it's going to be a show, and it's going to be amazing. And I actually started the business not only to try and have a business that treated people fairly and squarely and properly, and I was talking about EDI, and even now I say to people, please don't worry so much in your businesses about people of different gender or sexuality or ethnicity, because you're still treating your receptionist like a second-class citizen. And that was really my thesis of let's get into this fantastic industry, but change the culture. And that was the whole point. It was to try to be clever, to try to be considered, to try to be considerate to others when social media was starting and everybody was just tweeting anything. And thinking it might be all right. Yeah. And then finally, maybe to be countercultural, maybe to look at doing things a bit differently.
Disruptive. Yeah.
And so when I started the company, it was the beginning of fair trade, and I thought, I know, I'm just gonna like promote the Pangayas of the world. And the market just wasn't
ready.
there. It just wasn't there. I used to go to natural product fairs in Nottingham on the train and beg people to give me their money. And they were like, yeah, we could give you £100 a month and you can have a go. And it was disheartening. And sort of luminaries in the fashion industry said to me, look, go, do something, have a career. Don't be so tight with your desires and beliefs. And then you can come back when you've done something to try and do better, when you've got some sort of, I wouldn't call it power, but a voice in the industry, if you like.
So
and
then...
things really bothered me a lot. And I just wanted to say one thing, because Ava is absolutely right. It's all about supply chain. But being in an office with, frankly, surrounded by the most beautiful clothes in the world, and actually having had the honor and privilege of wearing those clothes, trafficking samples to get coverage in editorial or even in, you know, above the line advertising space, I was like, we've got the data to prove now that that dress has traveled 12 times around London on the back of a motorbike and nobody has featured it. It's like how...
Or back to New York and then to LA
Or,
and then
exactly,
Paris and
because
Milan
Nicole
and,
Kidman wants to have a look at it. And like, I just, you know, increasingly maybe as I got older, I maybe became a little bit more sensible, and I was like, I just can't, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Can't stand by the system
And
anymore,
it wasn't only on the fashion side, it was on the beauty side, on the wellness side, on the lifestyle product side. And, you know, I always tried through my career to work with brands. Most recently, I built a brand with Harry Styles. And I was like, Harry, this world does not need another celebrity brand.
No.
Harry, tell me what you know about skincare. Let's have that chat.
Right.
Because,
okay, interesting.
You know, I know you've got 45 million followers. I know they faint when you twitch your left little finger. But do we need another celebrity skincare brand? And so this has really been ongoing, but with what happened there was that we used the power of that community to give back.
Good.
We did create product, and we did just do short merch drops, as Ava's saying. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to have another SKU every 3 months and some NPD because somebody wants something new. And we gave a lot back because the sales were so fantastic that we gave back. So off the back of that, I was asked 3 years ago now to apply for the role, which is a voluntary role, of chair of SmartWorks. And SmartWorks is the #1 female unemployment charity. Across the country, we have 11 centres, 800 volunteers, 90 members of staff, and 6 boards. So the local boards report into the group board, which I chair. And we do 2 things, and 2 things only. We take stock from individuals and from brands, from retail brands, overstock. We know that there's plenty of it that sometimes goes to places that we'd rather not think about. And we dress unemployed women for their interview success from head to toe in luxury clothing. And then they spend 2 hours with us having interview coaching. And we're a very data-driven organization, and it sort of fluctuates in the mid to high 60s, but at the moment 63% of our clients, we call them our clients, get the job within 2 weeks of seeing us.
That's wonderful.
So this year we will help 8,500 clients.
That's good. With that in mind, if you don't mind interrupting, I think one of the things I feel strongly that's so good about Extreme Hangout is the fact that we often work very much with driving a better future for youth and giving people hope and optimism. And I think hearing from Eva and the way that Pangaea are addressing that and giving young fashion consumers and anyone who gets dressed every day an alternative choice that means that they're not going to sleep with a bad conscience, and they're not voting with their dollar or their pound for a worse world but a better one. And it sounds like SmartWorks, I mean, we know what they're doing that brilliantly, and it sounds like you're doing that brilliantly with the work with Harry and all the other projects you do under Science Magic.
But I think the point about SmartWorks is really important because in the world, I hope you'll agree with me, Ava, we are very privileged to wear beautiful clothing. Not everyone is in this situation. And I dress clients myself for a day every 3 months. And so I get to meet our clients. We've dressed many, many women from Ukraine who have come here with nothing. We have dressed in the COVID pandemic 79 air hostesses from Ryanair in their mid-50s who've given their entire life to being air hostesses wearing a uniform. And the terror as a middle-aged woman of having to get out there and get a job and know what to wear. And is it cool, is it not cool, am I going to fit in? Because I've always had a uniform. And I could go on and on and
Got
on.
it.
So the confidence that the clothes, and I suppose what I wanted to try and bring awareness to is that, of course, when you see something fantastical in the pages of the Times going down the runway, you're like, what's that about? I just want to show that first impressions count and clothes can make you feel fabulous. And if we can just do little tiny things, and Ava will save the world, not me, but because what I'm doing is so tiny. But when you have got 11 showrooms of beautiful clothing that would otherwise, forgive me, maybe go in landfill or worse. And you can take a client and say, what do you like to wear? And she goes, I don't know. I wear trackies. I've been in my house for the last 6 years caring for my mom.
Yeah. Well, I suppose what you're saying is there is an inherent passion of power in fashion, which is why, you know, Oscar Wilde used to say the clothes bear upon the very soul of the wearer. It's why the actors I used to dress in Hollywood would rehearse in costume, because they can get into character. It has this innate power that goes beyond utility, beyond fiber, beyond, okay, yeah, we go to the gym in functional clothing, but otherwise clothing has a bigger function than just its pure function of utility, right? So I think with that in mind, could we maybe move on to what young people who are watching, either in the room here or watching digitally, what hope we could give them and what power we would advise them to exercise to try and drive this industry that we love so much and are now finding increasingly uncomfortable. That's why all three of us do the jobs we do now. What would you say, Eva, that you could, apart from buy some Pangaea and look after it, wear it well, wash it well, etc., but
Well, I would
what
say
else could you say?
First and foremost, buy less. And I know that that's a very provocative statement to come, and even from a company that sells product. And we do need to sell product to sustain our business and pay our employees and do the good that we want to do in the world. But we buy too much stuff. There's too much stuff out there. And we need to think more carefully about what we buy. How much do we need it? And I think we need to also consider what it is we're paying for. So I think everyone should have much, much more care and attention to look inside the brand, read on their website, you know, use your power as as a consumer and the power of your money to actually enforce the positive change. And there is so many brands out there, or vintage, secondhand or rentals, or, you know, different kinds of models that can allow you to get something that might be new to you, but it wasn't new from the start. But that, we have a lot of power to the individual. But I always used to say that it's on the industry. You can say it's also on legislation.
It is.
Because of course, if we look at the industry on a broader scale, probably 40% of the industry is doing something. They have sort of profound sustainability work in place, and they do, you know, they do exchange their fibers. They work with certifications. They look at their supply chain. It's still a little bit in the nice to have, to be absolutely honest. I think
The sustainability piece, you mean?
yes,
Yeah. And it's
even
now
for the
increasing-
industry piece, even for the companies that are trying to do the good work, it's still sort of, they do a capsule collection, right?
Yeah.
But then they still do a majority of their products is still conventional
it's like
produced.
a little bit of organic cotton
and a little
here
bit of
and
organic,
then-
and a little bit of that. But I think so. You know, we really need to change that and step that up a lot more. We just had the 15th anniversary of the Global Fashion Summit. I mean, we're still nowhere. We have less than 2% organic cotton, less than 2% recycled cotton. Just looking at cotton, regenerative cotton cannot even be measured. It's that little. We're 15 years in. What are people doing? You know, how is that possible that we just keep growing in volume? And that we haven't really at all looked at the, you know, how can we decouple value creation from growing as a company? Is there other ways? Can I sell the same product more than once? Can I rent it out? Can I, you know, be more mindful in the way that I set up my entire business? And I do think that the majority of the focus should lie on the industry. It's not the consumer's fault that
I
we
agree
got
with that.
here,
I agree
and
with
it's
that.
not them that, you know, has, you know, I understand if you guys are not stamping your feet in the H&M store demanding better products, but that you just buy what you like and where you can get a good bargain and where somebody puts something on sale. And that's where we need legislation to also help, not to punish the consumers, but it is unfortunately still a good business model to overproduce and mark down your product.
Unfortunately,
Which also increases the volume of product stuff that we buy.
Exactly.
If you can get 3 for the price of 1, then people buy 3. We don't need 3.
No, we don't.
And I think we need the legislation to help create a level playing field, to help enforce those who want to do good. It is more expensive for Pangaea to produce the products that we do.
Of course
Which
it
is also why the price point is higher. Because it does cost more if you want to take care of the entire supply chain and the field.
Yeah, exactly.
That you didn't extract from it, but that you actually kept nature alive as you sourced your materials. So we need legislation to help create that level playing field. Then we need the industry to make sure that you guys have a better choice. That there are much better products on the market so you can still shop. But
I can jump in, I think,
but there is just one last piece. But if there is a role for the consumer, then it is to actually think about your power as individuals. I think we often feel disconnected from influence. Problems are global. World's going under. It's doom and gloom. We've got no hope. And we often look at ourselves and our patterns, and we're like, what does it matter what I do, you know? Does it matter if I recycle? Who cares? Somebody's picking it up and throwing it all in the same bin anyway, or, you know? So I think we sometimes feel less empowered as individuals, but we have a lot of power.
And communities, it could be your
We
community
have
of 10, it
the
could be your
power
community
of
on
vote
social.
and the power of our money, and it matters much, much more than you think. I remember being a teenager not wanting to go to a march against nuclear weapons in the 80s. And my dad said, but what if everybody said that?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So I went. And it's a little bit the same. If you all do a little bit different, think where you put your money, buy differently, consider what you have, maybe repurpose it, swap, exchange with a friend, you know, or, you know, resell some.
Can I touch on the consumer piece? Because I think what's interesting is, having been in a magazine business, I was at many editions of Vogue and The Economist and Giulietta, where our paths crossed back in those days when you were helping editors like me. And we were working, you know, on behalf of the brands some of the time, or the magazine, to get their stuff on the pages or onto the celebrities. And I think there's a piece here where I think, and I'm curious to know if you agree or what your thoughts are, but I think that there's been no time like there is today where consumers are marketed to in a way that is so aggressive and so manipulative of their neural pathways, their reward circuits, where I don't think you absolutely shouldn't blame a consumer for wanting to be fashionable, to be their best self, to express themselves, because they are powerless in the face of these algorithms and images from influencers and everything that comes down the funnel at social media into their own orbit that's within a sort of 2-foot radius of them. They're seeing this stuff at them all the time. And we've come from this background where we know how to successfully market and brand something. So with that in mind, like, what would you advise consumers to think about so they can make themselves more immune to the power of this? If you look at Shein, their business model is this unbelievably, I mean, if you took the ethics out, it's a brilliant, you know, it would be brilliant if you weren't looking at their ethics, and they're about to IPO in London. What are your thoughts as a...
I hear you completely, and I agree with you. And as Ava said, I think that, you know, I remember going into Virgin Active, and they said you can only have one towel. And I was like, you make your business more sustainable, not me. Find a way. I need more than one towel. I need one for my hair and one for my body. Don't put your sustainability actions on your customer that you're charging the same price for. But I think that the issue for me is that you're right. It is thrust at us, and we don't even know it. And, you know, when I look at my own Instagram feed, it's right there. It's just giving me more of the same. And if it was an embroidered dress, then 5 more will come up. And I think that there's a few things that I've started to learn. I never buy the first time I see something anymore. And it's made a massive difference, because the neural pathway is a feel-good. It's like the chocolate or the glass of champagne.
It's a reward circuit.
I just want it. And I used to, well, I suppose you would call that impulse buy. And now, even if I'm really, really, really sure that I like it, I'll put it in the basket or I'll leave it in the store, but I will not buy it on that day. That's the first thing. And my beloved husband is here, and sometimes he's had to go back on a holiday the whole day because actually I really do want it after all. Exactly. So there's that. The second thing is that when I grew up, when my mum used to go out for dinner, really illegally, I used to brush the babysitter off and go and try on her clothes in her cupboard because I wasn't allowed, because she had some nice, not that many, but nice clothes. And that's ridiculous. I've now got 2 daughters who are 25 and 27. Darcy, our youngest daughter, is just about to go off on some lovely summer holiday. I'm like, what do you want? Let's get as many wears out of this stuff as possible.
Let's sweat this stuff.
Let's really get this. And so actually that whole business about, you know, these are my clothes, and sisters fighting over clothes. I think somehow architects should build a house with one wardrobe, and a family should be able to share, sorry for the mums in the room, just share clothing. And
or communities can share clothing too, to Eva's point, whether you're in a college dorm or a workplace or
vintage,
any community,
or
digital community.
Whatever it is. And also, one thing that really surprises me at SmartWorks, maybe wrongly, it shows my own ignorance, but our clients don't know how to sew.
Yeah. Repairs.
And actually repairing garments, and I'm getting myself to the point now where I've just refreshed garments a little bit or changed the buttons to make it less boring because, my human psychology is that I want new, I want different.
Yeah.
But actually looking after your clothes and realizing that your clothes are going to become a much more valuable asset, either share them or repair them. And when I see clients coming in and they're dressed in, Burberry, an amazing Burberry suit, and there are brands that are incredibly generous to us. And they say, but the trousers are too long. And of course, we've got sticky tape and we've got everything that we can do. But it's like, do you not know how to sew? Because...
Okay, who in this room knows how to sew? Okay, that's impressive.
Really cool.
If you don't, there's a great platform called Sojo, and there's another one called The Seam, and they're a digital first, Instagram first repair service, and they have tutorials, but there's plenty of good tutorials on YouTube. And interestingly, to your point, Julia, I mean, if you prolong the life of your clothing by 9 months, it would bring down fashion's footprint on the downstream, which is the consumer use phase, the waste phase. It would bring it down by 30%. Yeah. I wrote that in I wrote a white paper for the British Fashion Council on the consumer use phase of fashion, and it's 30%. And the other thing we learned was Vanish sponsored our white paper, who do the stain removals, and their research, they conducted a study on 25,000 young people, and it showed that the number one reason for clothing being thrown away is because it fell apart. Why did it fall apart? Because mostly it was made extremely badly using compromised labor out of bad materials in countries many, 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 many miles away from us.
Or it's stained.
Or it was stained.
Or it's stained.
Exactly.
And to that point, learning to look after your clothes and treat them with respect, a bit like, we used to eat animals and treat them with the utmost respect. Now everything is just dispensable. Everything isn't precious. And so the final thing that I'd like to do, just call to action, is, as Ava said, it's not the big things. If we all did small things, and if you have got clothes that you're not wearing that you want to give away to a wonderful home of high quality clothing, please give us your clothes, and go on our website and donate your clothes. And clients and volunteers and donors across the country are just amazing. And I can see now that people that give us their clothing are thinking, right, I'm going to give a dress and a coat and a pair of shoes and a bag and a scarf. And that's a whole outfit for one of our clients to get the job in. So there's
and feel great.
Wonderful, wonderful ways to help people with your clothes.
Absolutely. Absolutely fun. If I sit on the board of a charity called Give Your Best, who do something it's a bit different to you, but they showed us that their value proposition is that there's 5 million women in the UK alone in clothing poverty. I sat next to one of them at a round table in the House of Lords the other day. She was from Nigeria, and she'd arrived here as an asylum seeker with 3 children, and she said that she had only just enough money to feed her children, but she wanted to get dressed. What she and her children would do is go to the charity shops in the mornings before they open to go through the big black bags of donations and to find clothes in there. And what she didn't know, and I told her from the research I'd done for my white paper, is that about 75% of clothing donated to charity in this country ends up in the developing south. There's 15 million items a week arrive in Ghana alone, clogging up their shores. I mean, that's how wasteful fashion is. So, like, if you want to donate to charity, give them stuff that's in good condition that will sell again. Because charity shops are not bins, and they're treated like that.
Yeah, and then we need to ask the local municipalities or councils to collect textile fiber so they can go back into textile fiber recycling. Yeah. So they can be reused, so we don't have to extract so much new virgin fibers. But I think there's a point around buying quality. I think it's a really good one, Julieta, the one about thinking a second time. It's like, I
Yes.
mean, you wouldn't get a tattoo either right away, right?
And
Like an
honestly,
impulse, or maybe my daughter
Yeah.
would. But but I think to think an extra time, just make sure that you really want this.
Yeah.
Because of course we should still be able to buy things and enjoy them.
Yeah.
But I think really put consideration behind your choices.
It's a
And
bit like I
and
always
I
think-
would also say consider quality as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes it follows price as well. It does often. And
Not
the funny
always.
thing is also that not always. A lot of the luxury brands have become less good in quality, but yeah. If I look
Actually,
at
on the
some-
note of
but I
quality,
think
can I-
there's a sense about when you purchase things and you pay a little bit more, you often treasure it.
yeah, you look
It's
after
true.
the
It's
And
specials.
look
it's
after it in a different
emotional
way.
longevity,
And I
yeah,
think that's
yeah.
it's, and this is a cycle that is not to blame on any of the consumers, but on the industry that we're producing so much cheap stuff that we've become wasteful. So fashion is all of a sudden this commodity that you just take and you use it and you dispose
Like a
it.
perishable
Sometimes,
good, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you
Should we
don't
just
even
define
need to,
quality for people who are tuning into this? Because I always feel like we read that statement in the media, like buy good quality, but what's good quality for one person is for somebody else, right? It's very subjective. So for me, good quality is to look inside the clothing and look at how the seams are attached. If they're just overlocked and you can really give them a good yank and they feel like they might come apart, that's not good quality, right? Like what else, how else? And I know we're at time, so we'll wrap this up, but any closing thoughts around how to help people navigate what is quality?
Yeah, I think quality is also things that lasts in design. It's not that you can't follow like immediate trends and do some small things here and there, but I think buy things that is your style and things that you will like for a long time. But quality for me often is in the materials. What's it made of and how is it made? And does it feel like something that is durable?
Okay.
I think that's absolutely right. The only thing that I would add is a bit like the algorithm and a bit like everything you absorb in terms of media. My first question is, where has this come from?
Yeah.
And, we don't think about that because we're so detached from the soil and the earth where everything comes from.
Yeah.
We go to a supermarket and buy a vegetable in a piece of plastic. So I always say to my daughters, if you're reading something that you're believing or you're buying something, could you just try and find out, and there's sort of 4 R's that I think about, which is revenue and return. You got to make money to make change. But reputation and retention. If you hear of people, Pangaia has a good reputation, they'll probably retain their staff, they'll probably retain their clients. That's good business. And that's why in the end, my new iteration is the better brands practice, because I think better brands are about revenue and return. They're about reputation and retention. And I've actually trademarked responsible joy. Because I think that we are iniquitous as a species. We want new stuff. We know that it's
Shiny
not good
objects
for
and
us to have 10 chocolate cakes. The subconscious tells us we'll have it anyways, right? We know we shouldn't go in the sun. We keep going in the sun,
That's true.
right?
So we're at time. I think I'm going to have to get us to wrap. Is there anything else that we've missed? Any questions from anyone as well? There's a gentleman in the front. What would you like to ask? And what's your name? Hi, Jack.
Where are you from, Jack?
So I'm from Cardiff. I'm starting an upcycled fashion brand, actually with my mum, who used to be in the fashion industry, working for Agent Provocateur.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. But it's sewing, so it's patterns that people then sew themselves. And I noticed you mentioned sewing, but you mentioned repairing and like extending longevity. And you also mentioned a few other things that are really interesting with sewing specifically, like the fashion equivalent of lentils is something that you said. And that is a big problem with sewing, I think.
And what's your question? Is it for Juliet or Eva or me?
I think it's kind of for all of you. Like,
Okay.
what do you think about people sewing their own clothes? And is that a system change thing? Does that feed into the culture? How do we get people to start sewing more?
I've got some immediate thoughts, and I'd love to ask these guys as well. But I mean, when I grew up, I had an unconventional upbringing. I was raised by a lady who was a bit like a sort of, if Judi Dench was Mary Poppins, and she was a nanny, and she had been born in 1922, so she sewed everything. She made everything on a little sewing machine, or she handmade it, and she knitted in the evenings in front of the telly, and she taught me to sew. Then my mum also trained as a seamstress, and she taught me to sew. So we always sewed growing up, and of course it's not. We now outsource a lot of our seamstressing to the Global South, which in some ways gives revenue to women who might otherwise be below the poverty line. So there's a sustainability aspect there of social impact, because you can't just take away all those jobs. But the act of sewing, if you're asking about how you can encourage people to get inspired by sewing, is it's just like using your hands for anything, whether it's sculpting some clay, cooking, gardening, repairing, darning, sewing. It's like a meditation when you get into your body and you get out of your head, or you get out of watching a screen, or you get out of having a conversation, or doing what you're doing, being busy, and you get into your body and use your hands to make something. It's really rewarding. And when I still do the odd bit of making my own clothes, or repairing them, or upcycling them myself, and it's so satisfying when you sew on a button, or you take up a hem, or you add a patch here, and you're so proud of it, because you're connected to the process. It's just like if you've made your food, or it just gets brought by Deliveroo, it's the same thing. You always cherish it more. Would you guys agree? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, just one thing, Jack, that I was thinking about was that, there's been so much press really about retail and how retail is struggling, and, it's hard out there right now for any brand and any retailer. But I always remember somebody saying to me that at Liberty, you remember all the Liberty patterns and the Liberty fabrics, I think probably underpin the P&L of that business. So it might be worth having a chat with the folks at Liberty, because their business has traded for many, many, many decades because of a fabric and the fact that we all made little smock dresses to start with out of Liberty fabric. And I just think also that what you said, Mary, was so right. I was on the train last night. There were meant to be 12 carriages. There were 4, so it was really nicely sardine. And in the boiling heat, and this lady wanted to talk to me, and she ended up being a psychology teacher at UCL. And she said to me, what do you think the 2 happiest jobs are? Because she said, my students have got terrible mental health issues. And the 2 happiest jobs are, one is being a landscape gardener, and the other is being a potter. And she said that your neural pathways, if you're using your hands, keep your mental health. And years ago, I did an interview with the Telegraph, and in the kind of high fashion days, and they're like, so how do you relax? Who's your therapist? Who do you see? And I was like, I do tapestry. And she laughed, and she said, you're not gonna, you don't want that published, do you? You don't want that actually printed.
Damn right.
I was like, I do,
so
because when I'm done with emails, and I've done with being a mum, and I've done with everything, I will sit and sew and be perfectly meditative.
Yeah, it's heaven.
So I think there is a huge craft industry out there, and good luck, and keep going.
And Jack, maybe with your brand, you could find some verified sewing courses where they've got good teachers and they've got good reputation and good reviews, and you could make that like part of your ecosystem. So, like here, we're giving you an upcycling brand to get involved with. You have to do some sewing yourself, but here's a place we recommend who could teach you, and or some videos. So you then give people that extra bit of support, so they're not like, okay, now how do I learn to sew? You've given them that end-to-end thing. I hope that's helpful. Eva, any thoughts? Yeah. No, okay. Any further questions from anyone? And I'm very much aware that we're at time. Okay. We're getting that. Okay. It's like they're doing the Oscars and the music starts playing. Okay. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you to my 2 fantastic panelists, Eva and Julieta. And thank you, Extreme.